All right, so I want to change things up a little bit in the way I do videos going forward. So for the next little bit, I just want to talk about just straight news. Don't really want to talk about the numbers anymore because pretty well everywhere in Canada they're down. Exactly what I said. And honestly, it's getting kind of old talking about it, given the fact that we pretty much know exactly what's going to happen. Um, the numbers are down. They're gonna claim, oh, it's because of masks, even though there's no correlation anywhere that it's because of masks. The numbers didn't trend down in Eastern Canada until, like, I mean, you look at Ontario, it was almost a month. The numbers already trended down in Alberta. Calgary's had the mask laws for about a couple of weeks. Edmonton about a week, I think. Again, so the numbers were already trending down in Alberta. There's no correlation between the masks. Um, and again, like I say, the talking about the numbers is honestly just getting kind of old and boring. If there is another big spike, I'll probably talk about it again. But again, in pretty well all of Canada, the numbers are down. I don't think there's a province that's had a clear trend up. There has, I think, like PEI or someone had like 5 cases yesterday, but Canada as a whole, the numbers are going down. Like exactly what I said, they will go down in August and September. They'll probably tick up a little bit next winter, but I don't think it'll be too much. But again, the big thing to be worried about is not that there'll be this second wave or third wave, whatever you want to call it. The scary thing is if there's a push to re-lock down, which I don't. I would probably lean towards no, but that's assuming that they're going to force everybody to wear masks, probably. And if there's a vaccine by then, they'll probably want to force people to do that. And who knows, maybe contact tracing as well. Who knows? Like nothing would shock me at this point. And the one thing that I did get wrong about this is that when the government first came out and being against masks, I was actually somewhat for it, and I said, yeah, it seems to be working relatively well in Japan and those kind of areas. But I mean, for starters, I don't think that it's mandatory there. And second, I would never support even if mandatory masks single-handedly prevented this pandemic, I would not have supported it because I'm not for forcing people to do things, regardless of whether or not you think it's the right thing. That is authoritarian because authoritarians will always claim that it's in the public's best interest. Again, that's the one thing that people continually get wrong. So again, when it comes to the one big thing that I did get wrong about this whole thing is that I radically underestimated just how far the government and the sheep would take things, basically, and that I thought people would be somewhat rational. But again, that is the one thing that I got wrong. So anyway, the first thing I wanted to talk about today is from James Todero. He's an MD, Columbia University. And he put this tweet out a couple days ago, and he says there's growing evidence that T cell immunity allows populations to reach herd immunity once 10 to 20% are affected or are infected. This would explain why a highly transmittable virus in densely populated areas peaked at 10 to 20% infected regardless of lockdowns or masks. And again, that's something to point out too, and that you look at New York and that they were massively infected at the start of this. They're very densely populated, but the cases have gone down a lot. You just look at the same things in Italy, in Spain, and these kind of places. So that is something that is very interesting, and it's something that is very good because it means that a lot less people are going to be are going to be infected than we think, basically. So that's a very good thing, a very good thing. And again, the other thing to point out too is that it completely disproves the rationale for lockdowns and for masks because again, the only way that makes sense is if you have to get like 70, 80, 90%, which is what we originally thought. But the numbers are clearly showing that that's not the case. I mean, you look at Sweden too. People are, I mean, getting to Sweden here. This is at a Newsweek, and it's titled Sweden death rate lower than Spain, Italy, and UK despite having no lockdown. Now, they're lower than some other countries in Europe. They're also lower than about, I think, 10 or 11, 12 states. So when people hear about Sweden, they always think, oh, it's this area, though, what they did was this terrible idea and it didn't work. But the reality is that it did work. And the reason the media has stopped talking about it is that the cases and the deaths in Sweden are incredibly low now, like incredibly low, and that's not the case for other areas because other areas are still having a decent amount of cases. I mean, Canada, the States, the numbers in the States have trended slightly down over the last week or so. But again, the Sweden's literally having like a death or two a day, literally. And that's something. And again, they got a population of what, 10 million. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good considering where some of these other countries are at. So again, that's something to point out that. And again, Maxime Bernier says here, evidence is mounting that there is no need for a strict lockdown and continuing restrictions that are killing our small businesses. Again, there was no evidence in the first place. There was no evidence even at the height of this to lock down, and the fact that we still have people wanting to lock down just goes to show just how insane some people are. Actually, a lot of people. But anyway, and this is a story out of the Wall Street Journal, and you have to pay to read it. But I mean, long story short, they basically found that the majority of face masks coming from foreign countries, especially China, don't even meet the proper standards that the FDA has set out. And again, this is just something I've been pointing out for the long time, is not only are masks rather pointless, I mean, there's no evidence that they make a difference. But the problem too is that even if, let's just say that they do work flawlessly, most people don't use them properly. Most people are touching their face, they're adjusting the masks, which completely defeats the purpose there. And the other thing too is that a lot of these masks um, coming from foreign countries are proven to be completely ineffective. And the other thing too is a lot of people are wearing cloth masks, which we know beyond a shadow of a doubt they're even less effective than the medical grade masks, which aren't even that effective to begin with. And this is the other thing too, that a lot of these medical grade masks, they don't even meet the standards that the FDA has set out, which means probably 90% of people, probably 95% of people out there wearing masks aren't literally are doing nothing. They're literally it's 100% pointless because if you're wearing a cloth mask, well, there's which is the majority of people from what I've found, there's no evidence that those work. And the medical grade masks, there is a little bit of evidence, but it's largely negligible. And the problem with that is that a lot of those don't even they're faulty. They don't even meet the standards again, which this is just the seems like millionth piece of evidence that masks do not work. Like there's no point in it. There's no point whatsoever. Um, so the last thing I wanted to talk about here is from Corey DeAngelis. Now again, this is something that I've talked about a lot recently because it's a big issue and because I think it should be a big issue. And he says here, DC public schools won't reopen in person until at least November 6th. They spend over $30,000 per kid. That money should go to the families. Now, again, if you actually cared about kids' education, again, this is I've said this a million times, but I still see so many people that don't seem to understand this. And that if you actually care about kids' educations, then you would be for a system to where parents, the government allocates 10,000 or 20,000, 30,000, whatever the number is. Parents are simply given a voucher. This is how much money we're spending per kid. You have a voucher. You can send your kid to whatever school you want, which means there would be competition. Now, again, that would be the best system. Now, why are people so against that system? Well, for many reasons. Number one, it would be exposed that public schools do a terrible job, both educating people, I mean, mainly educating people, and that they largely don't educate people. And it would also expose the fact that teachers and a lot of these administrators are overpaid. And that's the thing I've pointed out ad nauseum, that if teachers really thought that they were worth as much money as they were being paid and they were as valuable to society as they like to pretend, then they would be perfectly fine with a system like this, because if anything they would prefer a system like this because they would have the ability to get paid more if they're a better teacher. But the reality is that most teachers aren't worth as much money as they're being paid, and we know this for sure because, like I say, if they were, they would be perfectly fine with a system like this. Now again, a lot of them are brainwashed. A lot of them are brainwashed by the unions because the unions make a ton of money off this kind of stuff. They have a ton of power when it comes to this kind of stuff. stuff. And it's the same thing with the NDP in Alberta. The NDP in Alberta want to hire thousands of teachers literally within weeks or a month tops, which is impossible. That's not even possible. But again, the reality is that all they care about is the union jobs. They care about the money. Again, Alberta, we're spending what, 13, 14,000 per kid. That's, you have a classroom of 30 kids, that's over $300,000. Like, how in the world do you think that that's not enough money? That's enough to pay two teachers 100,000 a year and still have over 100,000 left for other stuff, for supplies and for paying other people that work at the school. Like, there is no way that you can look at someone with a straight face and argue that that's not enough money. But the reality is that the unions want to siphon off, at the unions and the bureaucrats want to siphon off as much money as they possibly can for themselves. And again, this is why whenever the left complains about corporate greed, I don't take them seriously, and most people on the right don't take them seriously because they do the exact same thing. And their solution, the everyday leftist solution to the problem, will only make the problem worse. The everyday right-winger solution to the problem will make the problem better. Now, you can argue all day long about the politicians, which I probably wouldn't even argue with that much. But the reality is that the average right-leaning voter doesn't want what happens. The average left-leaning voter does want the corporate corruption. They just want it in a different way. Rather than the banksters and the oil, people getting all the money, it's the unions and the bureaucrats and the administrators and the teachers. It's the exact same thing. They want, or at the very least, they want a system that ends up with most teachers, especially once they get their tenure, making six-figure salaries, having 3 months off during the year. That's what they want, because why they want that is that they know that that's more money for them. Teachers overwhelmingly vote for the left. Unions almost exclusively give money to the left. Again, so it's just simply a money thing. I don't understand why there's such a hiccup. And this is the thing, too, that if they could at least just be honest with people, at least we could get somewhere, but they won't, because if they do, they would just be honest that they're doing the exact same thing that they complain about. So, anyway, I just wanted to point that out. So if you like the video, make sure to hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Check out all those links in there in the description. Make sure you follow me on those other platforms if you haven't already. And like I say, stay tuned for more videos.